Welcome back. Our conversation on battleground states continues. Former Vice President Joe Biden, if you believe the polls, is holding a lead over President Trump in 6 of the traditional swing states. And as we discussed with Colorado's Republican Congressman Ken Buck, according to the firm Public Policy Polling, and again, I say this is a Democratic firm, is trailing Biden by 17 points. Well, we know Trump changed his campaign leadership, but how much is this really going to help? Joining us now is Newsmax contributor and political analyst Mark Halperin. Mark, welcome back.
Great to be back, guys.
All right, so Ken Buck pointed out the fact that the margin of victory for Democrats in Colorado has slowly started to shift down, right? And Trump lost between 4.5 and 5 points last cycle. The polling says right now that it's in double-digit lead for Biden. What's your take on where Colorado stands as a battleground state?
No, not that long ago, Colorado and Virginia were kind of the ultimate swing states, and both parties competed fiercely there. They have shifted far to the right. You know, in the midterms, Democrats swept control of the legislature, swept all the statewide offices. And in the Senate race, you don't have Cory Gardner, I think, with reverse coattails, although he could still win. So President Trump, last time, Sean, you'll remember, he went to 10 states in the last weekend and on the Monday before Election Day. Colorado was one of them. And he didn't win. He lost half those states, including Colorado. I can't imagine that the president and his campaign, even with the new leadership, is going to be able to devote very much to Colorado. There's so many other swing states that are more likely to be part of a path to 270 that I don't think Republicans are going to have a comeback year in Colorado this year, either at the presidential level or below.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I kind of agree. I think Minnesota is much more ripe for picking than Colorado because at the end of the day, Colorado has trended left, at all these other levels. So I think it's going to be tough. But you brought up Cory Gardner, and I asked Chairman Buck about this. It's interesting because basically Cory Gardner, the senator, would have to run ahead of President Trump in all realistic scenarios. That's not how it would normally work, right? Normally, you're either dead even or you're a little bit behind the top of the ticket. Do you think that Cory Gardner can put together enough of an operation to actually run ahead of President Trump?
He can. John Hickenlooper emerged from the nomination fight for the Democrats, not as strong as some people thought. Cory Gardner has more money, which in a Senate race matters. But if you look at history, Sean, going back to 1992, if an incumbent senator is running in a state that the presidential candidate of his party wins, they win 97% of the time. If you run and your presidential candidate loses your state, you win 70% of the time. Big difference. And I think Cory Gardner, I don't think he's quite as endangered as some people do, but he's clearly one of the most endangered Republican incumbent senators this cycle. And Hickenlooper, while he's not as strong as some thought, is still a pretty darn strong candidate in the state. Yeah. He's won statewide before as governor, and he's a good fit culturally for the state.
Mark, Sean and I talked about this yesterday. The Trump campaign had a major shakeup up top with Bill Stepien replacing Brad Parscale. Do you think that this was the right move for the campaign? And secondly, do you think that it will have an effect at all?
Lindsay, I think it was the right move for at least 3 reasons. One is Brad Parscale is a very talented guy at lots of things, and he knows how to get along with people, but he's never run anything like this scale of a presidential campaign. He's going back to doing what he did so well last time, digital. Second, Stepien has a quiet confidence. He's not looking for attention. He's looking to win, and I think that's what the campaign needs. And finally, they needed something to say we're doing things differently. Too many Republicans in Washington and around the country saying we need to go in a different direction. I think it will help on balance. Most Republicans I've talked to since the move are encouraged by it, but it's really up to Sean's old boss. The president is going to have to drive a disciplined message on the economy, on China, and other things. And if Bill Stepien can force the president to do that, it'll help a lot, but I doubt he can.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. At the end of the day, the candidate matters. And in this case, Trump, he almost is his own campaign manager. But I think Stepien understands the logistics, the blocking and tackling that happen on the ground and the importance of that. And that's key going into this. I want to switch gears for 1 second on you. Today, Kellyanne Conway was talking about whether or not the president should resume corona briefings. It was interesting. When he had the briefings, it was missed success. I think that right now the country should see the president of the United States out there every day. Schools are getting ready to go back or not. And seeing the president out there and talk about what's happening around the country would probably be helpful if he could stay on message. What do you think about whether or not briefings should come back?
Well, I've talked to a lot of Republicans about this. I talked to them during the time he was briefing and getting, as you said, mixed reviews. What seems to be the consensus view is the president does, as suggested, to be talking about the issue that's dominating the country. If he came out, if he gave an optimistic, encouraging, but realistic speech and then left the stage and let the health experts answer questions. A lot of Republicans would like to see that. I think the chances of that, though, are minimal because the president can't do rallies now. So when he gets the microphone, that's his opportunity to put on the Trump show. So I think in theory, it would be good for him to resume them politically. But I think most Republicans would rather he figure out a way to be in a more disciplined environment. And those briefings have not proven to be moments of discipline for him.
We'll have to see if it takes Kellyanne Conway's advice. Well, I got to ask you, Mark, we just have about a minute left here. But if you could give the president one piece of advice, if you thought there was one piece of messaging he needs to adjust that would really get him back on track, what would it be?
Most every Republican I talk to, particularly the Senate Republican strategists, say the same thing. They want him to talk about the economy, contrast on things like regulation, on the environment, on economic growth, on tax policy. That's what Republicans would like to see him talk about in a disciplined way. And the president has done some of that, but he's his own worst enemy because he'll say 7 things on the economy and they'll say 1 thing about the Confederate flag. And that's what the media is going to cover. He needs to figure out a way to get the focus on the issues where Republicans have an advantage for a lot of voters, and particularly those suburban voters. And until the president does that, most Republicans I know are not particularly optimistic about the direction this is headed.
The funny thing is, you're right. I mean, he leads on the economy. He should stick to it. That's his strength. He's done very well. Mark, thanks for being here. We're going to see you a little later in the show when we have our company quiz. So go get ready.
Great. I'm ready.
All right. This is tough. All right. Are you ready to send your kids back to school? The debate continues as the Democrats push to keep schools closed. Bill Whittle's going to be here to talk about what he thinks needs to get done when we return.